Good evening. You may be wondering why we have another video tonight. And, I looked at some more stuff today over in Europe with the news media all across the board to see on how much are they actually reporting on this, what is really going on here in the United States with Trump and Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency. And I found out there's very little reported other than the normal rhetoric you hear about Trump being autocratic and an oligarch and all of that kind of stuff. And no one has actually reported in Europe of what we have suspected here for a long time is the people who live here and pay taxes, and what Elon Musk is uncovering with the Department of Government Efficiency. And I want to give you an example. And at one point or another, this data is going to be published in paper form and is going to be available to everyone. But this is sort of the upfront news in this and the issues we're facing here in the United States. Elon Musk and his people, they ran the database for the Social Security Administration. That is the government entity which pays out the retirement benefit every month to the Americans who either retired at 62 with a deduction or at 65 with full benefits. This is also the time which you usually receive or you are entitled to Medicaid. And that Medicaid is the health insurance for senior citizens. You can get a private insurance which covers the things which Social Security or Medicaid don't pay for. And that is what we call Social Security Plan B. Benefits, basically, that is a private insurance. You have to pay for that. And they pay then the big bulk of your medication and that sort of stuff. And the first thing they did is they ran the currently issued Social Security checks to all the Americans which are entitled to it. And they came up that we had over 3 million Americans at the age group from 120 to 129 who are receiving benefits. And then the next age group with 3 million Americans is from 130 to 139 years of age. We have a little bit over 6 million people in the United States, which are, according to the Social Security checks which are issued, based on their date of birth, the Social Security Administration has on record, are now between 120 and 140 years old, or 139 years. In all reality, is how many people do you think are still getting to see or live at that age? If you still believe that we have that many people here at that age group, we do have the most advanced medical system in the world, but I can assure you that the average age here is somewhere between 78 to 88. And only a very few people see 100, maybe 105. And then very rarely we had one person who turned 110, and there might have been one lady at one point who turned 120 or something like this. But we do not have over 6 million citizens here in the United States in the age group of 120 to 139 years old. That is a given. So these payouts are fraudulent payouts, and some people are receiving these checks and they seem to be capable of cashing these checks, or they're getting that directly deposited into their bank account. These people basically do not exist, And the people who applied for this under their names, and the way they do this is they go to the cemeteries and they write down all the names, and then they can look up the old Social Security numbers in the Social Security number index, and they filed claims, and if that works out, if they were accepted, and they were paid. This is how outdated our computer system is to catch this when these applications are filed. The oldest person they were digging up in the database, which is currently getting active Social Security payments, is 240 years old. So, and this is just one department. Then we got Medicaid. And here at Medicaid, what happened is that the insurance company or the doctor's offices overbilled the Medicaid insurance system for services either not rendered or the wrong services, and there is no accounting in this. So we have people who had gotten pacemakers who are either dead already or they never received the pacemaker. These are realities. We can call it fraud, but there's massive fraud on the table here. And this is basically why we're going through this, of what we're going through. So you have every government entity has some issues where they appropriated or paying out money which should not be paid out. For European politicians, for the European media, which is more, who has this fantasy idea about the United States as being the crown jewel of democracy and values and anti-corruption. The reality is what we are uncovering here and what we have suspected and known for quite some time. We had several groups were busted during the Biden and Trump era before for Medicaid fraud, with overbilling and wrong billing and that stuff. There were literally groups together of doctors and billing offices which defrauded the government. They're all in jail now. They're sitting here with 10, 20, 30-year sentences in the federal penitentiary. This is what this looks like, but it is by far more massive of what anyone had anticipated. And that's what Elon Musk is undoing. He also blocked today all of the credit cards which are issued by the government to federal employees, from the military to all the other government offices. And he reduced their credit line to $1 so they cannot purchase anything, because there is discretionary spending in it, which equals about $50 billion a year, which goes to these credit cards, and no one really knows of what people are buying with these cards and whatnot. So, and the underlying cause is what Europe is not reporting at all, no one, whether left or right or whatever political party it is the fact that the United States budget this year, this fiscal budget, has a $2 trillion deficit. We're spending $6 trillion, but we're taking in only about $3.5 to $4 trillion, with all revenues coming in between tax payments, what we pay as taxpayers, and, tariffs which are already in place, and government fees, and this, that, and the other thing. $2 trillion deficit on an annual basis. That debt has to be financed, that spending. So this is why they went in there, or they're going in there, and they're dissecting everything. They're laying lots of employees off. There is a lot of animosity here in the United States. People are angry at Elon Musk. We had incidences in Colorado where the Tesla dealerships have been attacked with Molotov cocktails by angry and disgruntled citizens or employees who got laid off in this, and that sort of stuff. You don't see any of this reported anywhere over in Europe. But this is our current situation. As a result of this, basically, they slammed in the brakes. This has nothing to do with autocracy or being a dictator or anything else. This is just, that was a question of whether or not we can keep going with this, or we have to stop this. And eventually things are going to normalize, and they're going to figure out what is a legit payment and what was a fraudulent payment. And it was not fraudulent by the government, but where people have applied for some form of a benefit or what have you, and they basically bilked it out of the government. That could be in welfare, that could be with those Social Security retirement cases, and so far and so on. On top of this, what we also have suspected for a long time is that we have these skeleton employees in the government. Those are people who never really show up to work, don't do anything, but they collect the check. They may show up Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 at the main office, so it looks like they're there. But other than that, no one has any idea of what they're doing the rest of the week. These people can nowhere be found, or they're not accountable to nothing or anything. So this is right now what we're trying to go through, or what they're trying to go through. I'm not trying to defend this. I'm just reporting to you of what is going on here, what we have suspected, what we have known from the past, but we still don't know the full extent of it until Musk comes up, maybe in a couple months or a few more months from now, with a complete report. And I'm pretty sure that at that point, the Justice Department is going to start arresting a lot of people throughout the country for government fraud on the government, and that sort of stuff. That is probably going to come down the line later on. And so this is why I said is our finances here are shaky. And you don't hear any reporting of this in Europe. Not one news channel has investigated this. Not one news channel has outlet, not one political party has looked at this stuff or talked about it. I don't know. Is it an internal issue to the United States? I don't know. We have one of the departments they first went after was the US Aid Office, which is usually part or is administered through the Department of Foreign Relations, basically. And here we found out that there's a lot of programs which they're supporting where the money goes to NGOs in other countries, in Russia, in Georgia, and they're basically actively, financially supporting anti-government operations over there, which we look at. If you're more of a Democrat, you probably say we're looking at we're trying to support democracy by being against Putin, for instance, or the new guy in Georgia. And this is starting to come to an end, because if you remember this, is in 2016, Hillary Clinton's computers were hacked and all of the stuff, came out there on WikiLeaks, and that caused a huge problem altogether. And then it was said that was a Russian collision, which turned out it really wasn't a Russian collision, but it could have been. And this was based on the activity of US aid officers in Russia during that time of Obama, basically. So the Russians came back, and they may or may not have done anything over here and influenced our politics, which did cost Hillary Clinton the election. It was the payback time for US aid in operations in Russia. The only things are interrelated, but no one talks about this stuff. So I hope that this is starting to make sense why we're trying to get out of this. Back during the Cold War, before we had all that technology and NGOs and all of that stuff, is the German Public Broadcast Association of Germany had a station. It is called Deutsche Welle, and they used to program in several languages on shortwave. So did the BBC in London and a few other radio stations around the world, to deliver unfiltered news to the people behind the Iron Curtain, whether they were in the Soviet Union or somewhere in Eastern Europe. They could listen to BBC in their native language, in Russian or in Polish or whatever the language may have been, to get away from the propaganda they were receiving through their channels. The same thing with Radio Moscow, had a shortwave program in several languages, which they were broadcasting their propaganda over all around the world. So people who were interested in the news out of the Soviet Union, tainted by communism and socialism, that sort of stuff, they could dial in to those. This was as much of an interference you had as a regular citizen. 99.999% never dialed in on their radios if they had shortwave capabilities. You had to have shortwave receptor channels for that on your radio to be able to listen to it. Most radios have only AM and FM, so they're completely out of the loop, and they weren't even affected or didn't even have the possibility. You had to buy a special shortwave receiver. So this is how we used to deliver this. Now, with US 8, the way this developed, the internet and everything else, you have active interference in the political systems in other countries. You can justify this the way we used to justify it during the Cold War and say, well, we're doing this in order to promote democracy, to give people an idea how democracy works and that sort of stuff. Back then, like I said, we did it through shortwave radio. Today, they're actively in the countries, and they're having not only offices, but they're also distributing monies to groups, political groups, activists, and that sort of stuff. Orban said already he wants to get these people out. The outside funding source for this is Soros, who has fumbled a lot of money in, because some of the things USAID would not fund, so that's where Soros stepped in to cover the shortfall in this. And there's going to be more and more countries who are coming and saying, we're not going to get involved, or we don't want outside nations, outside countries, no matter what the political ideology is, to interfere with our internal politics. We heard that from Freddie Merz. We heard it from the socialist over in Germany during the election process, during the campaigning, when Elon Musk had that interview online on Twitter, they're on X, with Alice Weidel. That caused a lot of problems, and they were absolutely, outraged that Elon Musk would interfere in the German elections. Well, that is nothing else of what US 8 did in other countries. We can justify this 6 ways to the moon, and you can say this is more admirable or this is more admirable. Another observation I have also made is that the Christian Democratic Union today, with the CSU, the union in short, has become really more and more center-left, especially now with the coalition. So the firewall they set is basically, you can picture this as a division, the same division we have at the moment, between the Democrats, meaning the Christian Democrats, the Christian Socialists, and the Socialist Party and the Green Party and all of this to the left stuff. And to the right is basically the AfD, or the Republicans, who are the Trump Republicans primarily. So the firewall separates these two. And so their narrative now in Germany, out of that political center-left spectrum of what you're going to have as government, is basically politically aligned with the Democrats over here and their political narratives in every sense and form and shape. So that's kind of where that is at. And Alice Weidel with the AfD is basically on the Trump side of this. That is basically what we can say. That would be a fair assessment. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of what the reality is at the moment of living here in the United States. And with that, you have a great evening.